Welcome back, everyone. Comment where you're watching from today. In the glittering world of political commentary, where sharp words often cut deeper than swords, nobody expected the morning show panel discussion to take such a dramatic turn. And Romney, wife of former presidential candidate Mitt Romney, had been a subject of ridicule among certain media circles for years. But on this particular morning, as the sun cast long shadows across the Manhattan skyline, the atmosphere in the studio was about to shift irreversibly. The pristine television studio buzzed with the usual pre-show energy. Makeup artists made their final touches. Producers whispered last-minute instructions, and the smell of fresh coffee mingled with the crisp, air-conditioned breeze. Ann Romney sat quietly in the green room, her elegant posture masking years of silent battles. She had agreed to this interview, knowing full well the hostility she might face, but determination gleamed in her eyes. The show began like any other. The panel of 4 commentators settled into their familiar rhythm, discussing the day's political headlines with their trademark mix of wit and cynicism. Among them sat Rebecca Walsh, known for her razor-sharp commentary and unforgiving stance toward political figures. The conversation flowed smoothly until they reached the segment about Ann Romney's recent public appearances and her advocacy work. Rebecca's voice carried a note of contempt as she addressed the audience. "Let's talk about Ann Romney's latest attempt to stay relevant. She's been making rounds, claiming to understand the struggles of average Americans while living in multiple mansions." The other panelists chuckled, feeding off her energy. "And now she's trying to position herself as some kind of health advocate? Please." What Rebecca and her colleagues didn't realize was that their target sat just moments away from joining them, listening to every word. The producer counted down to the segment transition, and Ann Romney emerged from backstage with grace that seemed to pause time itself. The panelists' smug expressions flickered as they realized their previous target was now walking toward them. The studio fell into an uncomfortable silence as Ann took her seat. Rebecca shifted in her chair, but her professional facade remained intact. "Mrs. Romney, welcome to the show," she said, her voice carrying a hint of forced politeness. The tension in the studio was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. Ann Romney smiled warmly, showing no sign of having heard their previous comments. "Thank you for having me," she replied, her voice steady and kind. "I understand there are some misconceptions about my advocacy work that I'd like to address." Rebecca, attempting to maintain control of the narrative, pressed forward with her usual aggressive style. "You've been speaking about health challenges and claiming to understand what average Americans go through. Don't you think that's a bit presumptuous, given your privileged position?" The studio lights seemed to dim as Ann Romney took a deep breath. Her response would change the entire tone of the conversation. "You know, Rebecca, illness doesn't discriminate based on wealth or status. When I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis in 1998, I wasn't Mrs. Romney, the politician's wife. I was just a mother of 5, terrified of what the future held." The studio fell silent. Rebecca's usual sharp retorts died on her lips as Ann continued, her voice unwavering. "There were days I couldn't get out of bed, days when I couldn't hold my children, days when I questioned everything. Money couldn't fix that. Position couldn't fix that. And yes, I had resources that many don't have, which is precisely why I've dedicated my life to advocacy and research funding." The other panelists shifted uncomfortably in their seats as Ann detailed her journey. She spoke of the dark moments, the victories, the setbacks, and most importantly, the thousands of Americans she'd met who fought similar battles with far fewer resources. Her words carried no bitterness, no accusation, just raw truth and compassion. "When you mock someone's illness," Ann continued, her eyes meeting Rebecca's, You're not just mocking them, you're mocking every person who wakes up each morning wondering if their body will cooperate that day. Every parent who worries about being there for their children. Every person who feels invisible because their struggle isn't visible on the outside. Rebecca's face had lost its usual confidence. The other panelists looked down at their notes, suddenly finding their previous laughter shameful. The studio audience sat in complete silence, many wiping tears from their eyes. "I don't share my story for sympathy," Anne explained, her voice growing stronger. "I share it because there are millions of Americans living with invisible illnesses who need their voices heard. They need understanding, not ridicule. They need support, not skepticism." The transformation in the studio was remarkable. The same people who had laughed minutes earlier now sat in reflective silence. Rebecca, known for her quick comebacks, found herself speechless. The power dynamic had shifted not through confrontation or anger, but through dignity and truth. Annie reached out and placed her hand on Rebecca's, a gesture so unexpected it caused the hardened commentator to look up in surprise. "I believe that empathy is more powerful than criticism," Anne said softly. "Perhaps we could use our platform to lift people up rather than tear them down." The producer, recognizing the powerful moment unfolding, signaled to let the segment run longer than planned. Rebecca, her voice slightly shaking, did something she'd never done before on air. "Mrs. Romney, I owe you an apology. We all do. We've been incredibly insensitive." The other panelists nodded in agreement, their earlier mockery replaced with genuine remorse. The studio audience moved by. The exchange began to applaud spontaneously. It wasn't the polite, prompted applause common in TV shows, but a genuine expression of support and respect. Anne Romney's response to their apology exemplified the grace she'd shown throughout the entire segment. "Thank you, but let's turn this into something positive. Let's use this moment to start a real conversation about invisible illnesses and the importance of compassion in our public discourse." The remainder of the segment transformed into an honest discussion about chronic illness, privilege, and the responsibility of media figures to shape public conversation. Rebecca, usually the cynic, found herself deeply engaged in learning about the challenges faced by MS patients and their families. As the segment drew to a close, Anne Romney delivered a final message that would resonate far beyond the studio walls. "We never truly know the battles others are fighting. Kindness costs nothing, but its absence can cost everything. Let's choose to understand rather than assume, to support rather than mock, to listen rather than judge." The impact of that morning's broadcast rippled through social media and news outlets. What began as an attempt to ridicule became a powerful lesson in empathy and understanding. The panel that had laughed at Anne Romney's illness found themselves transformed by her response, their tears genuine, their perspectives forever changed. Tell us in the comments, have you ever misjudged someone before knowing their full story? How did you learn from that experience? Remember to like and subscribe for more powerful stories that remind us of our shared humanity. The morning after the powerful studio confrontation, the video of Anne Romney's appearance had gone viral, touching millions of hearts across the nation. But few knew the profound story that led to that moment of truth. Today, we delve deeper into the journey that transformed a private struggle into a beacon of hope for millions. In the quiet corners of the Romney household, long before the spotlight of presidential campaigns, Anne Romney faced her biggest battle. The year was 1998, and the mother of 5 had been experiencing troubling symptoms she couldn't explain. The numbness in her legs, the overwhelming fatigue, and the mysterious loss of balance had become impossible to ignore. The prestigious Mayo Clinic, with its stark white walls and fluorescent lights, became the setting for a life-changing diagnosis. Dr. Elena Martinez, a leading neurologist, sat across from Anne, her expression gentle but serious. "Mrs. Romney, the tests confirm you have multiple sclerosis." Those words fell like heavy stones in a still pond, rippling through every aspect of her life. Back home, Anne stood in her kitchen, gripping the counter as waves of dizziness washed over her. The room that had once been her sanctuary, where she'd prepared countless family meals and celebrated birthdays, now felt like an obstacle course. Simple tasks became monumental challenges. The weight of a coffee pot seemed impossible to manage, and the short walk from the stove to the refrigerator felt like crossing an ocean. But it was in these moments of vulnerability that Anne discovered an unexpected source of strength. Her husband Mitt, known for his business acumen and political ambitions, showed a side few would ever see in public. He began carrying a small notebook, meticulously documenting every symptom, every medication, every small victory and setback. When fatigue overwhelmed her, he would sit beside her bed, reading aloud from her favorite books, his presence a steady anchor in the storm of uncertainty. The Romney children, watching their mother's struggle, adapted with remarkable resilience. The youngest would climb into bed beside her during her worst days, simply holding her hand. The older ones took on additional responsibilities without complaint, understanding that their mother's energy was now a precious resource that needed careful management, and listened intently, then shared a story she had never told publicly. "There was a day during Mitt's campaign when I could barely stand," she revealed. "The cameras were rolling and I had to smile and wave, but inside every muscle was screaming. That's when I realized that so many of us carry hidden battles, and that's why kindness matters so much." The revelation sparked a deeper conversation about the nature of invisible illness and the judgment often faced by those who suffer from them. Patricia Chen, another group member, spoke about losing friends who couldn't understand why she had to cancel plans at the last minute. "They thought I was being flaky or making excuses," she said, tears in her eyes. Anne's response would become one of her most quoted statements. "Invisible illnesses are like fighting a war that no one can see. The battles are real, the wounds are deep, but the warrior's strength often goes unnoticed." As her advocacy work grew, Anne began receiving letters from around the country. One particularly moving message came from Robert Anderson, a former corporate executive who had hidden his MS diagnosis for years, fearing professional repercussions. "Watching you step into the spotlight with such honesty gave me the courage to finally be open about my own struggle," he wrote. The letter inspired Anne to address the stigma surrounding chronic illness in professional settings. She began working with corporate leaders to develop better understanding and accommodation for employees with invisible disabilities. Her efforts led to policy changes in several major companies, creating more flexible work arrangements and improved support systems. Dr. Martinez, who had delivered Anne's initial diagnosis, followed her journey with admiration. "What makes Anne's advocacy so powerful is its authenticity," she explained. "She doesn't sugarcoat the reality of living with MS, but she also shows that it doesn't have to define you." The impact of Anne's work extended beyond the MS community. Her openness about her struggles helped break down barriers for people with other invisible illnesses. Support groups for conditions ranging from lupus to chronic fatigue syndrome began using her story as a template for their own advocacy efforts. One particularly touching moment came during a private meeting with Lauren Foster, a teenager newly diagnosed with MS. Lauren had been a promising athlete, and the diagnosis seemed to shatter her dreams. Anne spent hours with her, sharing not just coping strategies, but also stories of hope and triumph. "You're not losing your future," she told Lauren. "You're just learning to navigate it differently." 2 years later, Lauren would complete a modified marathon, raising thousands of dollars for MS research. She credited Anne's guidance and example for giving her the courage to adapt rather than abandon her passion for running. As Anne's advocacy work continued to grow, she began focusing on the importance of research funding. She used her platform to highlight the disparities in medical research, particularly for conditions that predominantly affect women. Her efforts helped secure millions in additional funding for MS research through private donations and increased government grants. The scientific community took notice. Dr. William Harrison, a leading researcher in autoimmune diseases, acknowledged the impact of her work. Mrs. Romney's advocacy has done more than raise awareness. It's helped us secure the resources we need to make real progress in understanding and treating MS. Behind the scenes, Anne continued to face her own challenges with the disease. There were still days when the fatigue was overwhelming, when the pain seemed unbearable. But she had learned to view these moments not as defeats, but as reminders of why her work mattered so much. During a private conversation with her longtime nurse, Maria Gonzalez, Anne reflected on her journey. "When I was first diagnosed, I thought MS would take everything from me," she admitted. "Instead, it gave me a purpose I never expected. It taught me that our greatest challenges can become our greatest opportunities to help others." Tell us in the comments, what invisible battles are you fighting? How do you find strength in your struggles? Your story matters, and this community is here to support you. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more inspiring stories of courage and resilience. The ripple effects of Anne Romney's television appearance continued to spread, but perhaps the most profound impact was happening in hospital waiting rooms across America. In these sterile spaces where hope often hung by a thread, her story had become more than just a viral moment. It had become a catalyst for change in how society views invisible illnesses. The prestigious Northwestern Memorial Hospital's neurology department had seen a significant increase in patients seeking early diagnosis for MS symptoms. Dr. Rachel Anderson, head of the department, noted a striking pattern. Before Mrs. Romney's advocacy, many patients, especially women, were told their symptoms were all in their head. Now they come in armed with knowledge and confidence to advocate for themselves. In the bright morning light of her home studio, Anne sat surrounded by letters, thousands of them, each containing a story of struggle, hope, and gratitude. Her assistant, Emily Parker, had developed a system to organize them by topic: newly diagnosed patients seeking advice, medical professionals sharing breakthrough stories, and families looking for guidance in supporting their loved ones. One letter stood out. It came from a small-town doctor in rural Montana, Dr. Thomas Bradley. "Your advocacy has changed how I practice medicine," he wrote. "I used to dismiss subtle symptoms. Now, I listen differently. Last month, this new approach helped me diagnose MS in a patient who had been struggling for years without answers." The letter prompted Anne to launch an initiative that would transform medical education. Working with leading medical schools, she helped develop a comprehensive training program about invisible illnesses. The program emphasized not just the clinical aspects, but the human experience of living with chronic conditions. During one memorable lecture at Harvard Medical School, Anne shared the stage with Dr. Sophia Patel, a neurologist who had herself been diagnosed with MS during her residency. The auditorium fell silent as Dr. Patel described how being both a doctor and patient had transformed her approach to medicine. "We're taught to look for obvious symptoms," she explained, "but some of the most devastating conditions hide behind seemingly normal appearances." The initiative gained momentum when Catherine Walsh, a prominent hospital administrator, implemented mandatory sensitivity training for all medical staff. "It's not enough to treat the disease," Catherine insisted. "We must treat the whole person, understanding that their experience extends far beyond our examination rooms. Anne's advocacy work took an unexpected turn when she received a call from Isabella Martinez, a high school principal in Arizona. Isabella had created a groundbreaking program supporting students with invisible illnesses, inspired by Anne's public speaking about her experiences. "These kids were falling through the cracks," Isabella explained. "They didn't look sick, so teachers and peers often dismissed their struggles." The program, now known as the Invisible Warriors Initiative, spread to schools nationwide. It provided training for educators, support systems for affected students, and education for the broader student body about empathy and understanding. Within its first year, the program had helped over 10,000 students better manage their conditions while continuing their education. One such student was Michael Chen, a promising young pianist whose MS symptoms had threatened to end his musical career. Through the program's support and adaptations, Michael not only continued playing, but went on to give a memorable performance at Carnegie Hall. His recital, dedicated to Anne Romney, brought tears to the eyes of audience members as he played complex pieces despite partial numbness in his hands. The corporate world also began to shift its approach to invisible illnesses. Laura Harrison, CEO of a Fortune 500 company, implemented comprehensive workplace accommodations after hearing Anne speak at a business leadership conference. "It wasn't just about following ADA guidelines anymore," Laura recalled. "It was about creating an environment where people didn't have to hide their struggles." Anne's influence reached beyond American borders. Dr. James Nielsen, a researcher from Copenhagen, contacted her about collaboration on an international study of MS progression in women. The study would become the largest of its kind, involving patients from 27 countries and yielding groundbreaking insights into how hormones affect MS symptoms. During a particularly moving speaking engagement at the World Health Organization, Anne addressed an audience of global health leaders. "Disease doesn't recognize borders," she declared. "Neither should our commitment to understanding and treating it." Her speech prompted the creation of an international task force dedicated to standardizing MS care across different healthcare systems. The impact on families dealing with invisible illnesses was equally profound. Support groups began incorporating elements of what became known as the Romney method, a combination of practical coping strategies and emotional support techniques. Sarah Rodriguez, a support group leader in Chicago, described the transformation. "Before, our meetings often felt like pity parties. Now they're powerful gatherings of warriors sharing strategies and hope." One of the most significant developments came through Anne's partnership with Dr. Elizabeth Foster at the National Institutes of Health. Together, they launched a comprehensive study of environmental factors affecting MS progression. The study revealed crucial links between stress management and symptom severity, leading to new therapeutic approaches. Anne's work also influenced how medical insurance companies approach coverage for invisible illnesses. After years of advocacy, major insurers began expanding their coverage of experimental treatments and alternative therapies. David Thompson, a healthcare policy expert, noted, "Mrs. Romney helped insurers understand that comprehensive care actually reduces long-term costs." The entertainment industry took notice as well. Award-winning filmmaker Alexandra Chang produced a documentary series featuring Anne and others living with invisible illnesses. The series, titled The Invisible Fight, won critical acclaim for its honest portrayal of daily life with chronic conditions. "We wanted to show both the struggles and the triumph," Alexandra explained. Anne taught us that both aspects are equally important to the story. Perhaps the most touching outcome came from an unexpected quarter. Veterans organizations began reaching out to Anne about incorporating her advocacy methods into their PTSD support programs. Marine Corps veteran Robert Palmer explained why. Like MS, PTSD is an invisible battle. Mrs. Romney's approach to advocacy helped us articulate our own struggles. As Anne's work continued to expand, she never lost sight of the personal impact. Every week, she still made time to meet with newly diagnosed patients, offering the same compassion and wisdom that had marked her early advocacy days. During one such meeting, she sat with Grace Wilson, a young mother terrified about her future with MS. "I remember sitting where you are," Anne told Grace, holding her trembling hands. "The diagnosis feels like the end of your story, but I promise it's just the beginning of a different kind of strength you never knew you had." The medical community continued to evolve in its approach to invisible illnesses. Dr. Richard Martinez, speaking at a national medical conference, acknowledged the shift. Mrs. Romney didn't just change how we treat MS. She changed how we practice medicine. We've learned to listen more and assume less. Tell us in the comments. How has your perspective on invisible illnesses changed? Have you or someone you know experienced the challenge of having others understand an unseen condition? Your stories help build awareness and understanding. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more powerful stories of transformation and hope. Behind the scenes of Anne Romney's growing influence in the world of invisible illness advocacy, a more complex story was unfolding. The same spotlight that allowed her to reach millions also cast harsh shadows, testing her resilience in ways few could understand. This chapter reveals the untold story of how she navigated these challenges while continuing to transform lives. The morning began like many others in the Romney household. Anne woke early, her body stiff from what she called a bad MS day. The previous evening, she had delivered a powerful speech at a major medical conference, but the cameras didn't capture the hours of rest required beforehand or the toll it would take on her body afterward. Dr. Victoria Bennett, Anne's longtime friend and medical confidant, often witnessed these private moments. The public sees Anne's strength, but few understand the careful balance she maintains, Dr. Bennett explained. Every public appearance requires careful planning and often days of recovery, yet she never lets it stop her from showing up for others. The true complexity of this balance became apparent during a pivotal fundraising event in Boston. Despite experiencing severe fatigue and dizziness, Anne insisted on attending. Her personal assistant, Claire Davidson, recalled the moment with clarity. She turned to me backstage and said, "If one person in this audience needs to hear this message today, then every bit of discomfort is worth it." The event proved more challenging than expected. Halfway through her speech, Anne felt her legs weakening, a familiar warning sign of an MS flare. Rather than retreat, she did something unprecedented. She asked for a chair to be brought to the podium. "Today," she announced to the stunned audience, "I'm going to show you what living with MS really looks like. Sometimes we need to adapt, and that's okay." That moment of vulnerability transformed into one of her most powerful advocacy tools. Dr. Benjamin Harper, a neurologist in attendance, later wrote, "In that instant, Mrs. Romney did more to normalize adaptation and accommodation than 1,000 medical lectures could have achieved." The incident sparked a nationwide conversation about accessibility and accommodation. Corporate leader Amanda Foster implemented a flexibility program in her company, inspired by Anne's example. If someone as accomplished as Anne Romney can openly acknowledge her needs, it gives everyone permission to do the same, Amanda explained. However, not all responses were supportive. Some media outlets attempted to use Anne's condition to question her capability as a public figure. The criticism reached a peak when an anonymous blog post suggested she was exaggerating her symptoms for attention. Anne's response to these accusations revealed another layer of her character. Instead of defending herself, she used the opportunity to highlight how frequently people with invisible illnesses face similar skepticism. During a candid interview with journalist David Richardson, she addressed the issue head-on. Every person with an invisible illness has heard some version of, "But you don't look sick." These doubts don't hurt me. They motivate me to fight harder for those who don't have a platform to defend themselves. The controversy caught the attention of Dr. Livia Santos, a leading researcher in autoimmune diseases. Her subsequent study on public perception of invisible illnesses, dubbed the Romney effect, revealed a startling pattern. The more visible public figures became about their invisible illnesses, the more likely others were to seek early diagnosis and treatment. Meanwhile, Anne's influence continued to grow in unexpected ways. Emma Taylor, a fashion designer who had hidden her own MS diagnosis for years, approached Anne with an innovative idea, a clothing line specifically designed for people with invisible illnesses. The collection featured elegant adaptations, hidden support structures, magnetic closures, temperature-regulating fabrics, all while looking indistinguishable from high-end fashion. The project, called Invisible Strength, launched to international acclaim. "Fashion isn't frivolous," Anne explained at the launch event. "When you're fighting an invisible battle, feeling confident and comfortable in your appearance can be a powerful form of self-care." Yet even as her public impact grew, Anne faced private battles that few knew about. Dr. Bennett revealed, with Anne's permission, how they would sometimes conduct medical consultations via video call when symptoms made travel impossible. She never wanted to cancel an engagement completely. We'd find ways to adapt, to keep her connected and contributing even on the hardest days. These adaptations led to an unexpected innovation. Working with tech entrepreneur Michael Zhang, Anne helped develop a telehealth platform specifically designed for patients with chronic illnesses. The platform, named Chronic Care Connect, revolutionized how patients could maintain consistent medical care while managing their energy levels. The platform proved particularly valuable for patients in rural areas. Sarah Henderson, living with MS in remote Montana, shared her story. "Before Chronic Care Connect, I had to drive 4 hours to see my specialist. Now, I can maintain regular contact without exhausting myself with travel." Anne Romney didn't just understand our challenges, she helped create solutions. During this period, Anne received a letter from Dr. Rachel Morrison, a young neurologist, who had recently been diagnosed with MS. "Your public journey gave me the courage to continue practicing medicine," she wrote. "I now use my personal experience to better understand my patients' struggles." This correspondence led to the creation of the Dual Perspective program, where medical professionals with chronic illnesses were paired with medical students as mentors. The program transformed medical education by providing future doctors with insights they couldn't gain from textbooks alone. However, the increasing demands of public life began to take their toll. During a private moment at a fundraising event, Anne confided in her friend and fellow advocate Lisa Chen, "Sometimes I worry that by making it look possible to do everything, I'm setting an impossible standard for others with MS." This revelation led to one of her most important contributions to the advocacy movement, and began speaking openly about the concept of sustainable advocacy, the importance of balancing the desire to help others with self-care and personal limitations. Working with psychologist Dr. James Wilson, she developed the Advocacy Without Burnout workshop series. The program taught other chronic illness advocates how to pace themselves, set boundaries, and maintain their health while fighting for their cause. The workshop series reached an unexpected audience when Olympic athlete Robert Turner attended. "After being diagnosed with MS, I thought I had to choose between being an athlete and having MS," he shared. "Anne showed me how to be both, how to adapt without surrendering my dreams." As her influence grew, Anne faced a new challenge, the expectation to be everywhere at once, She made the bold decision to start declining some speaking engagements, using these opportunities to elevate other voices in the invisible illness community. Leadership isn't about being the only voice, she explained. It's about creating space for all voices to be heard. This philosophy led to the creation of the Invisible Illness Speakers Bureau, a network of trained advocates from diverse backgrounds who could share their stories and expertise. The Bureau ensured that when Anne couldn't personally attend an event, another powerful voice would be there to carry the message forward. Tell us in the comments, how do you balance advocacy with self-care? What strategies have you developed for managing your energy while pursuing your passions? Your experiences might help others find their own path. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more inspiring stories about turning challenges into opportunities. For change, the world of medical research was about to witness an unprecedented transformation sparked by an unexpected partnership between Anne Romney and Dr. Isabella Reynolds, a brilliant but controversial researcher who had been pushing the boundaries of conventional MS treatment. Their collaboration would challenge the established medical paradigm and open new frontiers in the treatment of invisible illnesses. The story began in the quiet corridors of Johns Hopkins Medicine, where Dr. Reynolds had been conducting revolutionary studies on the connection between neurological conditions and environmental factors. Her work, though promising, had struggled to gain mainstream acceptance until Anne Romney stepped into her laboratory one autumn morning. "The moment Mrs. Romney walked into my lab," Dr. Reynolds recalled, "I knew something extraordinary was about to happen. Here was someone who understood both the science and the human experience of MS in a way few others could." That meeting would later be recognized as the catalyst for what became known as the Romney-Reynolds Protocol. The protocol represented a radical departure from traditional MS treatment approaches. Instead of focusing solely on medication and physical therapy, it incorporated environmental modifications, stress management, and lifestyle adaptations. Dr. Anthony Chen, a leading neurologist who initially criticized the approach, later became one of its strongest advocates. "We were so focused on treating the disease," he admitted, "that we'd forgotten to treat the whole person." The implementation of the protocol began at 5 major medical centers across the country. Rebecca Foster, a patient in the initial trial group, described her experience. "For the first time, my doctors weren't just asking about my symptoms, they were asking about my life, my stress levels, my sleep patterns. It was like finally being seen as a complete human being." The results were remarkable. Within 6 months, patients following the protocol showed significant improvements, not just in their physical symptoms, but in their overall quality of life. Dr. Maria Gonzalez, who headed the study at Mayo Clinic, reported, "We saw a 40% reduction in severe flare-ups and, more importantly, a 60% improvement in patients' self-reported well-being scores." Anne's involvement didn't stop with the protocol's development. She began working with architectural firm principal David Thompson to redesign medical facilities with invisible illness patients in mind. The result was the Adaptive Space Initiative, which transformed waiting rooms, examination areas, and even parking facilities to accommodate the unique needs of patients with varying energy levels and physical capabilities. The first facility, built under these new guidelines, opened in Denver under the direction of Dr. Sophie Anderson. "Everything from the lighting to the temperature control was designed with our patients in mind," she explained. "Even the chairs in the waiting room were specially chosen to provide proper support for people with muscle weakness or chronic pain." The success of these initiatives attracted the attention of the global medical community. Dr. James Liu, a prominent researcher from Singapore, reached out to propose an international collaboration. This led to the creation of the Global Invisible Illness Research Network, journey, connecting researchers and patients across continents. However, the path to progress wasn't without its challenges. Traditional insurance companies initially resisted covering many aspects of the Romney-Reynolds protocol, considering them experimental. Anne took on this battle with characteristic determination, working with healthcare policy expert Laura Mitchell to compile comprehensive data on the protocol's cost-effectiveness. "What we discovered," Laura explained, "was that while the initial costs were higher, the long-term savings in emergency care and crisis interventions more than justified the investment." This evidence eventually convinced major insurers to expand their coverage, making the protocol accessible to thousands more patients. The ripple effects continued to spread. Emily Parker, a high school science teacher with MS, developed a groundbreaking educational program called The Invisible Body, teaching students about autoimmune conditions through interactive experiments and simulations. The program, endorsed by Anne Romney, was soon adopted by schools nationwide. Meanwhile, Dr. Reynolds' laboratory became a hub for a new generation of medical researchers. Among them was Dr. Michael Zhang, whose work on genetic markers for MS progression was directly inspired by the Romney-Reynolds approach. Their work showed us that we needed to look beyond conventional boundaries, he noted. Sometimes the most significant breakthroughs come from unexpected connections. The impact on patient advocacy was equally profound. Catherine Walsh, who had struggled with MS for decades, founded the Invisible Warriors Leadership Program, training other patients to become effective advocates for their own care. Anne Romney showed us that our experience matters, Catherine said. "We're not just patients, we're experts in our own condition." The program's success led to its implementation in medical schools across the country. Dr. Thomas Bradley, Dean of Medicine at a prestigious university, observed, "Having patients teach our medical students has transformed how we approach medical education. It's not just about learning symptoms, it's about understanding lives." Anne's influence extended into the technological sector as well. Working with tech innovator Robert Anderson, she helped develop an AI-powered symptom tracking app that could predict MS flare-ups before they became severe. The app, named MS Forecast, became a vital tool for patients and researchers alike. The real breakthrough wasn't just in the technology, Robert explained, but in how it helped patients take control of their condition. When you can anticipate a flare-up, you can plan your life better. That's what Anne always emphasized, giving people back their sense of control. The app's success caught the attention of Dr. Isabella Martinez, a pioneering researcher in biomedical engineering. Together with Anne, she began developing wearable devices specifically designed for MS patients. These devices could monitor subtle changes in gait, balance, and muscle function, providing early warning signs of potential problems. One of the most touching outcomes of these technological advances came from Grace Wilson, a young mother who had been struggling to explain her condition to her children. Using the data from her monitoring devices, she could show them concrete evidence of why some days were harder than others. It helped them understand that Mommy wasn't just being tired. There was something real happening in my body. The Romney-Reynolds protocol continued to evolve, incorporating new research and patient feedback. Dr. Sarah Rodriguez, who joined the research team in its second year, developed additional protocols specifically for young patients. "Treating MS in younger patients presents unique challenges," she explained. "We needed to address not just the physical symptoms, but the emotional impact on developing minds." This led to the creation of the Young Warriors program, which combined medical treatment with age-appropriate psychological support and peer networking. The program proved so successful that it was adapted for other invisible illnesses, creating a comprehensive support system for young patients across multiple conditions. Tell, Us in the comments. How has technology helped you manage your health conditions? What innovations would you like to see in the future of medical care? Your insights could help shape the next generation of patient-centered solutions. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about groundbreaking advances in medical care and patient advocacy. As dawn broke over the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C., an unprecedented gathering was taking place. The Invisible No More Summit, organized by Romney, had drawn together medical professionals, patients, researchers, and policymakers from around the world. But perhaps more significantly, it had attracted major media networks, celebrities, and corporate leaders, a clear sign that invisible illnesses had finally moved from the shadows into the spotlight of public consciousness. Academy Award-winning director Alexandra Martinez stood at the podium, premiering her documentary, The Unseen Battle, which chronicled the lives of people living with various invisible illnesses. When Romney first approached me about this project, Alexandra recalled, she said something I'll never forget. We need to make the invisible visible, not just for a moment, but forever. The initiative sparked a revolution in workplace culture. Companies began competing for invisible illness-friendly certification, a standard developed by Romney's team in collaboration with medical experts and advocacy groups. Dr. James Sullivan, who helped create the certification criteria, explained, "We're seeing a fundamental shift in how businesses view chronic illness, from a liability to an opportunity for innovation." Meanwhile, in Hollywood, screenwriter Michael Chen was changing how invisible illnesses were portrayed in popular media. His hit medical drama series, Beneath the Surface, featured complex characters living with various chronic conditions. Romney showed us that these stories don't have to be tragic, Michael explained. They can be about triumph, resilience, and the extraordinary strength of ordinary people. The entertainment industry's evolution reflected broader societal changes. Fashion designer Laura Thompson collaborated with medical researchers to create adaptive clothing that looked indistinguishable from high-end fashion. "Style shouldn't be sacrificed for comfort," Laura insisted. "Our clothes help people feel confident while accommodating their medical needs." Education systems nationwide began implementing the Invisible Illness Understanding curriculum, developed by Dr. Sarah Rodriguez in consultation with Romney. "We're teaching the next generation that health isn't binary," Dr. Rodriguez explained. "It's not just sick or well, there's a whole spectrum of human experience in between." The program's impact became evident when high school student Emily Parker started a viral social media campaign called Invisible But Invincible. The campaign featured young people sharing their stories of living with invisible illnesses while pursuing their dreams. "Mrs. Romney showed us that our voices matter," Emily said. "We're not victims, we're warriors." Corporate culture continued to evolve through the Flexible Excellence program, spearheaded by business leader David Martinez. The program demonstrated how accommodating invisible illnesses could actually boost productivity and innovation. "When we stopped forcing everyone into the same rigid mold," David noted, "we discovered talents and perspectives we didn't know we were missing." The sports world underwent its own transformation. Olympic athlete Catherine Walsh became an outspoken advocate for athletes with invisible illnesses after meeting Romney. "Sports culture traditionally celebrated pushing through pain," Catherine reflected. "Now we're learning to distinguish between challenge and harm, between persistence and self-destruction." Ann's influence reached into unexpected corners of society. Renowned chef Robert Anderson revolutionized the restaurant industry by creating the first invisible illness-friendly dining certification. Restaurants meeting the criteria offered detailed ingredient lists, quiet spaces, and flexible seating options. "Food should bring joy, not anxiety," Robert insisted. "Everyone deserves to dine with dignity." The legal profession also evolved, with attorney Grace Thompson establishing the Invisible Justice Project, providing specialized support for people facing discrimination due to invisible illnesses. Romney didn't just change hearts, Grace observed. She helped change laws and create precedents that protect millions. Technology continued to play a crucial role in this cultural transformation. Dr. Benjamin Foster developed an augmented reality program that could simulate the experience of various invisible illnesses for medical students and the general public. Understanding comes from experience, he explained. We're helping people see the unseen. The impact extended to architecture and urban planning. Amanda Chen, a leading architect, incorporated invisible illness considerations into her designs. For public spaces, we're creating environments that work for everyone, she said. Access isn't just about ramps and elevators. It's about understanding different energy levels, sensory needs, and invisible challenges. Social media platforms joined the movement, with major companies implementing features to make their platforms more accessible to users with invisible illnesses. These included customizable content warnings, rest reminders, and adaptive interfaces. Technology should adapt to human needs, noted tech innovator Dr. Maria Gonzalez, not the other way around. The summit culminated in the announcement of the Romney Legacy Fund, a billion-dollar commitment from various organizations to continue advancing research, advocacy, and support for people with invisible illnesses. This isn't about one person's legacy, Anne insisted during the announcement. It's about creating a future where invisible doesn't mean unseen, where different doesn't mean less, and where everyone's journey is honored. Tell us in the comments, how has your understanding of invisible illnesses evolved? What changes would you like to see in your community to better support those living with invisible conditions? Your voice matters in this ongoing transformation. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about the people and innovations changing our world. The sun was setting over the Boston skyline as Anne Romney stood at the window of the newly inaugurated Center for Invisible Illness Research and Advocacy. The building, a testament to years of dedication and countless transformed lives, represented not just an ending, but a beginning. The morning show panel that had once mocked her illness now seemed like a distant memory, a catalyst that had sparked a revolution in how the world viewed invisible illnesses. Dr. Elizabeth Palmer, the center's director, joined Anne at the window. When we first met, she recalled, you told me that someday being invisible wouldn't mean being unseen. Looking at what's happening here today, I'd say that dream has become reality. The center, a first-of-its-kind facility, combined cutting-edge research with comprehensive patient support and public education programs. The facility's main atrium buzzed with activity as preparations continued for the next day's International Summit on Invisible Illness Innovation. Among the attendees was Dr. Richard Bennett, whose groundbreaking research on neuroplasticity and chronic illness had been directly inspired by Anne's advocacy work. Mrs. Romney taught us to look beyond conventional boundaries, he explained. She showed us that the best solutions often come from unexpected connections. Isabella Martinez, now a renowned patient advocate and medical researcher, was setting up an interactive exhibition called A Day in Our Lives. The exhibition used virtual reality technology to let visitors experience the challenges faced by people with various invisible illnesses. Understanding comes from experience, Isabella said. We're not just telling people about our challenges, we're letting them walk in our shoes. The center's innovative design, created by architect Michael Chang, reflected years of input from patients and medical professionals. Every detail, from the lighting to the acoustic engineering, was designed with invisible illness in mind, Michael explained. But what makes this place truly special is that you wouldn't know it by looking. Accessibility doesn't have to announce itself. In the research wing, Dr. Sarah Anderson was preparing to present the results of a decade-long study on the Romney effect, the measurable impact of public advocacy on patient outcomes. The data is remarkable, she noted. Since Anne Romney first spoke out, we've seen a 60% increase in early diagnosis rates and a 45% improvement in long-term patient outcomes. The center's educational division, headed by Dr. Thomas Rodriguez, had revolutionized how medical schools approached invisible illness. "We've moved beyond the traditional medical model," he explained. "Our students learn not just about symptoms and treatments, but about the lived experience of chronic illness. They graduate understanding that every patient is an expert in their own condition." Rebecca Foster, a former skeptic from that morning show panel, now led the center's media relations department. "Anne Romney didn't just prove us wrong," she reflected. "She showed us a better way to understand and talk about invisible illness." She turned critics into advocates. The center's impact extended far beyond its walls. In the corporate world, CEO Laura Thompson had implemented the Invisible Strength program across her global company. "We've seen increased productivity, better employee retention, and more innovation since adapting our workplace to support people with invisible illnesses," she reported. What started as accommodation became a competitive advantage. The sports world had undergone its own transformation. Olympic athlete David Chen, who had hidden his MS diagnosis for years, now openly competed while managing his condition. "Anne Romney showed us that adapting isn't giving up," he said. "It's finding a new way to excel." In the technology sector, Dr. James Wilson's team had developed an AI-powered support system that could predict symptom flares and suggest preventive measures. "The system learns from each patient's experience," he explained. "It's like having a knowledgeable advocate in your pocket 24/7. The entertainment industry had evolved as well. Filmmaker Alexandra Parker's latest series, Invisible Warriors, featured authentic stories of people living with chronic illnesses. "We're not telling stories of tragedy," she insisted. "We're telling stories of triumph, adaptation, and unexpected strength." The legal landscape had changed dramatically too. Attorney Catherine Walsh, speaking from her office at the Justice Department, described the evolution. "We've moved from fighting for basic accommodations to creating comprehensive protections. The Invisible Illness Rights Act has become a model for legislation worldwide." Perhaps most significantly, the next generation was growing up with a different understanding of invisible illness. Emily Chen, a high school student who had recently won a national science fair for her research on autoimmune conditions, represented this new perspective. "We don't see invisible illness as something to hide or overcome," she explained. "It's just one part of human diversity." The center's research had led to unexpected breakthroughs in other fields. Dr. Robert Anderson's work on fatigue management had revolutionized approaches to mental health treatment. "When we started looking at invisible illness holistically," he noted, "we found connections we never expected." In the center's community outreach division, Grace Thompson coordinated with schools, businesses, and community organizations to implement awareness programs. "The ripple effect has been incredible," she said. "We're seeing changes in everything from workplace policies to urban planning." Anne Romney's influence had spread globally. Dr. Maria Gonzalez, connecting virtually from Madrid, described how the Spanish healthcare system had adopted the Romney protocol for patient care. "It's not just about treating symptoms anymore," she explained. "It's about supporting the whole person." The center's architecture incorporated subtle but significant innovations. Designer Benjamin Foster pointed out features like adaptive lighting, sound dampening materials, and rest areas disguised as elegant lounges. The best designed solutions don't draw attention to themselves, he noted. They just work. As the day drew to a close, Romney gathered with the center's team in the main conference room. The walls displayed photographs of people whose lives had been transformed by the changes they'd helped create. When I first spoke out about my illness, she reflected, I hoped to help others feel less alone. I never imagined we'd create a movement that would change the world. Dr. Palmer raised a glass in toast. To all the invisible warriors, she said, past, present, and future, may they never again have to choose between being seen and being well. The next morning, as the sun rose over Boston, the center would welcome visitors from around the world. Each person who walked through its doors would carry forward the message that had started with one woman's courage to speak out. Invisible doesn't mean insignificant. Different doesn't mean less. And every person's journey deserves to be honored and understood. Tell us in the comments, what future innovations would you like to see for invisible illness support? How has your understanding of chronic illness changed? Your voice matters in shaping the future of healthcare and advocacy. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more inspiring stories of transformation and hope.